the 2 versus 20 cookies. I think there's so many people listening, myself included, who can relate to that moment of like, and I love how you're explaining it around like that happiness piece of it. I know happiness is a loaded term, but that idea of like, I'll use the word pleasure, right? There is pleasure in literally, and I'll say this as somebody who loves food too, like when that cookie is in your mouth and you're tasting that thing and just the way it reacts to your body, there is so much pleasure in that. So when you get to that second cookie, if you're just thinking about pleasure, like, yeah, third cookie, fourth cookie, fifth cookie, as much pleasure as I can stuff in. And what you're bringing to it is this idea of like, yes, true, there is pleasure in that, but there's also pleasure in when you go to bed that night and how you want to feel. And that pause allows you to kind of, in a very mathematical way, look at those two and be like, this one's a higher pleasure. And I'm going to use that and remind myself of that so that I don't eat the third, fourth, 20th cookie. I'm curious though, in that moment, right? Even after you had that day in 2010, when you're eating that second cookie, like what was it like for you? Was there still a compulsion to be like, I really want that next cookie, and you stopped yourself, or did the compulsion actually disappear?
It disappeared, and I'll tell you why. For example, I used to eat M&Ms by the handful. Okay.
Delicious.
So let's say, so I decided when I came up with this method, because I need to introduce or incorporate, what I decided was 2 foods a day that I would normally binge on, because if I kept staying away from them, I was just on another diet. So I thought I need to come up with 2 things each day that I have to figure out how to eat in moderation. So let's just take M&Ms for an example. So I could be at a party and eat handfuls and then go eat everything else that they had there. So let's say I wanted as one of my snacks M&Ms. So I would look at the package and I would figure out how much of this can I eat and be happy when it's over. So that was tied to, I at the time decided to follow Weight Watchers. The only reason I followed Weight Watchers was not from a diet perspective, but it was from a place that there are no foods off limits. So I tell clients either follow Weight Watchers where there are no foods off limits, or something like MyFitnessPal, which is an online calorie counter. Because if I'm incorporating these trigger foods and I also want to eat healthfully, I have to have some measurement of what's going in my body. Otherwise, the weight won't come off. So let's get back to the M&Ms. So if I wanted to have, I'm just going to use calories for an example, because maybe people can't relate to points as much, but let's say I wanted there to be, 200 calories for this snack I was thinking of having. So then I would look at the package, how many calories are in there? So let's say, in order to be happy when it was over, let's say the answer was 10. I would be happy with 10 M&Ms. I would ask myself, like, is that worth it to eat 10 if that's what's going to leave me happy? So, okay, yeah. So I would actually take 10 M&Ms and bring them in a room with me. And I would put one in my mouth and I would suck on that thing until it was gone. Then I would go to number 2, then number 3. By the time I did this and got all that chocolatey, gooey, loving deliciousness out of each one, by the time I did that 10 times, I was like, okay, I don't need to keep doing this. Or I used to eat Ghirardelli chocolates. Those are little squares. So I would take those again into that same peaceful room, and I would take 2 of them and I would open one up, break one of those squares into 4 pieces and take one at a time. So after I ate those 4, and it took a long time to get through 4 where you're just sucking on it until it disappears, I would then ask myself, do I actually want the second one now, or would I rather wait till later? So do you hear all that calmness and consciousness? It was like what it became was I went from willpower, which was fighting against myself and trying my best to hold on to whatever I needed to be on that and stay on that diet, to want power. What do I want? How much do I want? What do I want? How much do I want? When do I want it? Like, I was making all the choices. So want power became the thing that brought me to what I call the magic zone. And the magic zone in my life is being in this very calm place where I don't feel the urge to binge and I don't feel deprived. I'm just eating what I want, when I want, in an amount that will leave me happy when it's over. Now, I did say this takes work every day. There have been times in my life where I don't want to do it. I just don't feel like doing it,
I was going
right?
to ask you that, yeah.
And I will backslide. But as I mentioned earlier, like, I've been known to gain 9 pounds in 3 days. Since I started this, I have never binged. Okay, because as I said, once I saw I could eat 2 cookies or any of these small amounts, I never went back to stuffing my body with things. But if I became like not so awake at the plate, I might go for a handful of cashews, and then maybe some dry cereal. Um, but yet it was always controlled. And if I got on the scale and I was up 2, 3, 4 pounds at the most, then I would say like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, you've had enough fun. And then the weight would come back off. So it's just, I think when someone has an addiction, there's always something in the background lurking that could take you off your game, but I would never let it again because I don't have any need to.
Mm. There's almost like a macro micro control in that, right? Like the way you're explaining it through most of this is a little bit more the micro of like the day by day, meal
Yes,
by meal, how you're approaching it very deliberately, and you kind of know why you're doing what you're doing and you have it there. But as you said, none of us are perfect. So you're going to backslide. You might have a day where it's just such a bad day and you just feel this compulsion to be like, I need, whatever it is, right? That happens. But then you have that macro control too, which is like at a very macro level, I'm keeping an eye on this. And if a couple days go by or the weight starts to go up, I know I'm going to
yes.
ring that alarm. So it's like a little bit of a dual system in place.